I am Phoebe Williams, 34 years old, and I have always believed in supporting family. As a financial advisor who clawed her way up from nothing, I thought sharing my success with my parents was natural. So when they mentioned wanting to renovate their backyard for their 35th anniversary, I happily offered to cover the entire $12,400 cost. What I never expected was the phone call from my aunt that would change everything. Before I tell you how I turned my family's betrayal into a lesson about respect, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to family who took you for granted. I grew up in Milwaukee, the eldest daughter of Thomas and Nancy Williams. From an early age, I was labeled the responsible one. My baby brother Jackson came along when I was 5, and from that moment, our family dynamic was set in stone. My childhood home was comfortable enough. Dad worked as a high school physics teacher, while Mom managed the front office at a local dentist. We were firmly middle class, the kind of family that took one modest vacation each summer and saved all year to make Christmas special. From as early as I can remember, I took my role as the oldest very seriously. I babysat Jackson after school starting when I was 12. I got my first job at 15 bussing tables at a local diner to save for college. While my parents praised my responsibility, there was always a subtle undercurrent that made me feel like I was expected to be self-sufficient. Jackson, on the other hand, seemed to live under a different set of rules. When he forgot his homework, Mom would drive it to school. When he wanted expensive basketball shoes, somehow the money materialized despite the budget constraints I always heard about when I needed anything. Their faces would light up watching his basketball games, while they often missed my academic competitions because they were busy. I still remember the day I won the state math championship in my junior year. I came home clutching my trophy, bursting to share the news. My parents offered distracted congratulations before immediately shifting the conversation to Jackson's upcoming basketball tournament. That night, I placed my trophy on my desk and made a silent promise to myself that I would create a life where my achievements would be impossible to dismiss. College was my escape route. I earned a partial scholarship to Northwestern, but still had to work 30 hours a week to cover the rest. Those years were brutal, studying financial management while juggling multiple jobs, but I never complained. Not once did I ask my parents for help, even when I was surviving on ramen and coffee. Meanwhile, when Jackson went to UW-Madison 2 years later, my parents somehow found enough money to ensure he could focus exclusively on his studies and basketball. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a financial firm in Chicago. I found a tiny studio apartment with a leaky ceiling and poured everything into building my career. The distance from Milwaukee, only 90 minutes by train, felt liberating. I established myself as reliable, detail-oriented, and exceptionally good with clients. Within 5 years, I had tripled my salary and moved into a better apartment. By 30, I had become the youngest senior financial advisor in the firm's history. Despite the uneven dynamics of my childhood, I worked hard to maintain connections with my family. I called my parents weekly and made the trip back to Milwaukee at least once a month. I sent thoughtful gifts for birthdays and holidays. When Jackson and his wife Melissa had twins 3 years ago, I immediately set up college funds for both children, committing to deposit $500 monthly for each child. My brother Jackson settled in our hometown after college, taking a comfortable sales job at a pharmaceutical company. He lived just 15 minutes from our parents and saw them several times a week. His children became the center of my parents' world, as was natural. But what wasn't natural was how my parents would mention Jackson's modest work achievements like they were groundbreaking accomplishments, while treating my significant professional milestones as expected. Last Christmas, while helping Mom with the dishes after dinner, she casually mentioned that she and Dad were thinking about a backyard renovation before their 35th anniversary in the summer. She sighed as she handed me a plate to dry. "The deck is rotting in spots, and we have always wanted a proper patio with a garden area. Your father sketched some ideas, but we will probably have to wait a few more years to save up." I caught the subtle hint in her voice. It was a familiar pattern. Mom would mention something they wanted but couldn't afford, then change the subject quickly. Growing up, I had learned that these hints were never directed at Jackson. There was an unspoken understanding that I was the child who could help financially. 2 days later, Dad emailed me photos of the backyard, along with some magazine clippings of patio designs. The subject line read, "Just dreaming for now." The attached note mentioned how nice it would be to have the work completed before their anniversary celebration. Looking at my healthy savings account and the bonus I had just received, I made a decision that seemed so right at the time. I would fund the entire renovation as an anniversary gift. I told myself it was an investment in family memories and a thank you to my parents for giving me a stable childhood, even if it had its emotional complications. When I called to offer the gift, my mother actually cried, and my father's voice cracked with emotion. Their gratitude seemed so genuine that I felt a warmth I had been seeking from them for years. Maybe this generous act would finally prove my worth and cement my place in the family. "Phoebe, this is too much," Mom said. "We couldn't possibly accept this." But I could hear the excitement beneath her token protest. "I want to do this," I insisted. "You and Dad deserve a beautiful space for your anniversary and beyond. Let me handle everything." Little did I know that this generous offer would lead to one of the most painful lessons of my adult life. Over the next 2 months, I threw myself into planning the perfect backyard renovation for my parents. I took time off work to drive to Milwaukee and meet with contractors, landscape designers, and material suppliers. My professional skills came in handy as I created spreadsheets comparing quotes and options, maximizing every dollar of my $12,400 budget. The plan included a large stone patio with built-in seating, a pergola for shade, a fire pit area, lush landscaping with perennial gardens, and accent lighting throughout. I selected materials that would complement their home's exterior and chose plants that would bloom throughout the seasons. Dad had always loved gardening, but lacked the time and resources to create something truly special. This would be his sanctuary. Each weekend, I made the 90-minute drive from Chicago to Milwaukee to oversee the initial stages of the project. I brought coffee and donuts for the workers and took photos of the progress to share with my parents, who seemed genuinely excited and grateful. "This is beyond anything we could have imagined," Mom said, hugging me after the concrete for the patio foundation was poured. "You're making our dreams come true." During one of these visits, Mom mentioned their anniversary party in passing. "We're thinking of having it on the actual day since it falls on a Saturday this year." "That's perfect timing," I replied. "The backyard should be completely finished 2 weeks before then. Are you planning something big?" Mom seemed suddenly interested in the newly delivered plants. "Nothing too elaborate, just a nice celebration." When I pressed for more details, both Mom and Dad became vague. "We haven't finalized anything yet," Dad said, changing the subject quickly to ask about the type of stone I had selected for the fire pit. I might have noticed these evasions more clearly if I hadn't been so busy juggling the renovation alongside my demanding career. Several times I had to take contractor calls during important client meetings, stepping out to resolve issues about delivery schedules or material substitutions. My boyfriend Marcus, whom I had been dating for about a year, expressed concern one evening as I spent hours on the phone resolving a problem with the pergola supplier. "You're putting so much into this project," he observed as I finally set my phone down. "I hope your parents appreciate how much you're sacrificing." "Of course they do," I replied automatically, though a small voice inside questioned whether that was true. I pushed it aside. "This is what family does for each other." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Instead, he said something that would later prove prophetic. "Just make sure it goes both ways, Phoebe. You deserve the same level of consideration you give others." My best friend Allison was less diplomatic when I told her about the renovation over lunch. "Let me get this straight," she said, setting down her fork. "You're spending over $12,000 on your parents' backyard, taking time off work, driving back and forth every weekend, and micromanaging contractors, all while your brother, who lives 15 minutes away, is contributing exactly nothing. Jackson doesn't have the same financial flexibility." I defended, though we both knew my brother and his wife lived quite comfortably. "Besides, this is something I want to do." "Because you're still trying to earn their approval," Allison said bluntly. "Phoebe, when are you going to accept that you shouldn't have to buy your parents' love?" Her words stung, but I brushed them off. "This isn't about buying approval. It's about doing something nice for their anniversary." Allison reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Just be careful, honey. I've seen how hurt you've been in the past when your parents take you for granted." I should have listened to both Marcus and Allison. Instead, I increased my investment in the project both emotionally and financially. When the original landscaper backed out due to scheduling conflicts, I found a higher-end replacement. When Mom mentioned she had always wanted a water feature, I added a small fountain to the plan. As the work progressed, I found myself daydreaming about the anniversary party. I imagined my parents proudly showing off the beautiful new space to friends and family, acknowledging my contribution, and finally seeing me as the successful, generous daughter I had become. I pictured my brother looking around in appreciation, perhaps finally understanding the imbalance in our family dynamics. I even bought a new dress for the occasion, a flattering blue sundress that I thought would be perfect for an outdoor summer celebration. I blocked the weekend on my calendar and told Marcus to save the date, though I realized I had never actually received a formal invitation. "I'm sure they're just busy with all the renovation details," I told myself. "The invitation will come once things settle down." The backyard was nearly 70% complete when I received the phone call that would change everything. The betrayal blindsided me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was between client meetings when my phone rang. Seeing my Aunt Linda's name on the screen was a pleasant surprise. She had always been kind to me, my mother's older sister, who sent thoughtful birthday cards and remembered details about my life that my own parents often forgot. "Phoebe, honey, how are you?" Her voice was warm, but carried an undercurrent of awkwardness I couldn't immediately place. "I'm good, Aunt Linda, just busy with work and overseeing Mom and Dad's backyard project." "Yes, that's actually why I'm calling." She paused. "The backyard looks amazing from the photos your mom shared. You've been so generous." I smiled, settling back in my office chair. "Thanks. I'm excited to see it all come together for the anniversary party." The silence that followed lasted a beat too long. "About that," Aunt Linda's voice shifted to a careful tone that made my stomach tighten. "I just wanted to check something with you. The anniversary gathering next month is just immediate family. I assumed you knew that." My hand froze on the computer mouse. "What do you mean by immediate family?" "Oh, you know." She fumbled, clearly uncomfortable. "Your parents, Jackson and Melissa, the twins. I think your dad's brother Paul and his wife are coming too. Just a small gathering." The implication hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't included in immediate family. "Are you saying I'm not invited to the anniversary party?" I asked, my voice unnaturally calm, despite the roaring in my ears. Aunt Linda's voice became flustered. "Oh dear, I thought you knew. Your mom mentioned it was just going to be a small thing at the house. I assumed you couldn't make it because of work or something." "I see." My professional training kicked in, allowing me to maintain composure. "And you're calling because, well, I was going to ask if you wanted to contribute to a gift from the extended family," she admitted. "But now I realize there might have been a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. The understatement was almost laughable. "Thank you for letting me know, Aunt Linda," I said mechanically. "I need to go now. I have a client waiting." After hanging up, I sat motionless at my desk, trying to process what I'd just learned. I had spent $12,400 renovating a backyard for a party I wasn't invited to attend. I called my mother immediately, my finger trembling slightly as I pressed her contact. "Phoebe, hi, sweetie," she answered cheerfully. "The new plants arrived today and they look beautiful." "Mom," I cut in, "Aunt Linda just called me about the anniversary party. She said it's just immediate family. Is that true?" There was a pause before my mother replied, her voice suddenly defensive. "Well, yes. We decided to keep it small. Just Jackson and his family and a few close friends." "Close friends are immediate family, but I'm not—" The hurt in my voice was evident. "Don't be dramatic, Phoebe." My mother's tone shifted to the dismissive one I knew too well. "We thought you'd be too busy with work to drive all the way up for just a small gathering. You're always so busy." "I've been driving up every weekend for the past 2 months to oversee the backyard renovation," I reminded her. "The renovation for a party I'm apparently not welcome to attend." "That's different," she deflected. "That's business. You're good with that sort of thing." The conversation deteriorated from there. My mother became increasingly defensive, reframing their decision as consideration for my busy schedule, rather than the exclusion it clearly was. When I pointed out that I had specifically mentioned attending the party multiple times, she claimed not to remember those conversations. "I need to go, Mom. Dad's calling on the other line," she finally said, though I hadn't heard any indication of another call. Minutes later, my phone pinged with a text from my father. "Your mother is upset. Don't be dramatic. It's just easier this way. We appreciate the backyard." Just easier this way. 5 words that confirmed what I had always suspected but never wanted to believe. I was an outsider in my own family. A wallet, not a daughter. That evening, I discovered through social media that their definition of immediate family included Jackson, his wife Melissa, their twins, my dad's brother and his wife, my mom's sister Linda, and her husband, and 4 couples who were longtime friends of my parents. 15 people, none of them me. I sat in my apartment that night staring at the blue sundress hanging on my closet door and finally allowed myself to cry. Not just for this betrayal, but for a lifetime of never quite being enough despite giving everything I had. When the tears finally subsided, they left behind something unexpected. Not just hurt, but clarity, and with it, a steely resolve. They had made their choice. Now, I would make mine. That night, as I sat surrounded by contractor invoices and design plans for a celebration, I wasn't welcome to attend something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about a party. This was about a lifetime of being useful, but not valued, of buying approval that never came. I could have called my mother back, screamed, pleaded my case. I could have texted my father a passionate defense of my feelings. I could have called my brother to enlist his support. Any of those actions would have been understandable, even justified. Instead, I chose a different path. The digital clock on my nightstand read 11:37 p.m. when I opened my laptop and began methodically reviewing the payment schedules I had established for the renovation project. There were 5 main contractors: the stonework company, the landscapers, the carpenter building the pergola, the electrician handling the lighting, and the plumber installing the fountain and drainage system. Each had received a deposit with final payments scheduled upon completion. The project was about 70% complete, with final touches and plantings scheduled for the coming weeks. The largest remaining payment was $2,800 to the landscaping company, scheduled to transfer from my account in 3 days. With the calm precision I used in my professional life, I composed emails to each contractor. I explained that due to unforeseen circumstances, I would need to cancel all remaining work and payments effective immediately. I thanked them for their efforts to date and clarified that deposits already paid would not be recalled, but no further funds would be forthcoming. To the landscaping company, whose payment was pending, I made a separate call to my bank requesting a stop on the scheduled transfer. The customer service representative asked if there was a problem with the service. "No," I replied. "The service is fine. The relationship is not." After handling the contractors, I sent brief professional emails to the suppliers of materials that had been ordered but not yet delivered, canceling those orders and requesting refunds to my credit card. Most of the hard materials had already been delivered, but the decorative elements, outdoor furniture, and many of the plants were still pending. By 1:15 a.m., I had systematically dismantled the remainder of the project. The backyard would remain in its current state, a patio foundation poured but not yet finished, trenches dug for lighting, but no fixtures installed, a pergola frame erected but not completed, and piles of stone and soil waiting for hands that would no longer shape them. I closed my laptop and went to the kitchen, pouring myself a small glass of whiskey. The burn as it went down matched the fire in my chest, not of anger, but of something like liberation. Marcus called as I was getting ready for bed. He often checked in before turning in for the night. "Hey," I answered, my voice steadier than I expected. "You're up late." "Had a work thing. You okay?" "You sound different." I told him everything, from Aunt Linda's call to my mother's dismissal, to my father's text, and finally to the actions I had just taken. There was a long pause after I finished. "Wow," he finally said. "I'm not sure what I expected you to say, but it wasn't that." "Are you disappointed in me?" I asked suddenly, worried I had gone too far. "Disappointed?" He sounded surprised. "God, no. I'm actually impressed. You didn't yell or make threats. You just quietly took back your power. It's kind of badass, Phoebe." His approval warmed me more than the whiskey had. "It doesn't feel badass. It feels sad." "Of course it does," he said gently. "You're mourning the relationship you thought you had with your parents. That's normal. But I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." After we hung up, I slept surprisingly well without the anxious dreams that had plagued me lately. Something had shifted. I had stopped trying to earn what should have been freely given. The next morning, I went to work as usual. I focused intently on my clients, grateful for the distraction. It wasn't until my lunch break that I checked my phone and found it exploding with notifications. 15 missed calls from my mother, 12 from my father, 22 from my brother, multiple voicemails and texts, each more frantic than the last. The contractors had clearly contacted my parents as soon as their businesses opened for the day. I scrolled through the messages but didn't respond to any of them. This wasn't an impulsive action meant to get attention. This was a boundary being established, and I would not be rushed into conversation before I was ready. Allison texted, "Your brother just called me looking for you. What's going on?" I replied briefly explaining the situation. Her response was immediate. "Coming over after work with wine and ice cream. No arguments." By 5:30 that evening, the missed calls on my phone had reached 49. I silenced it completely as I left the office. I was just stepping out of the shower when the pounding started on my apartment door. It was so forceful that my neighbor across the hall opened his door to see what was happening. "Phoebe Ann Williams, I know you're in there. Open this door right now." My mother's voice echoed down the hallway of my apartment building. I wrapped myself in a robe and stood in the middle of my bedroom, my heart hammering. Part of me wanted to hide to pretend I wasn't home, but that would only delay the inevitable. I took a deep breath, smoothed my wet hair back, and walked slowly toward the door. Through the peephole, I could see my mother's flushed face, her finger raised to pound again. I let her knock 3 more times, each more insistent than the last. I watched her check her phone, presumably for any response from me. I saw her mutter something under her breath. Only when she took a step back, looking defeated and uncertain, did I finally open the door. The moment the door swung open, my mother surged forward, as if propelled by the hours of built-up frustration. "What on earth do you think you're doing?" she demanded, pushing past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. "The contractors all called us this morning saying the work is canceled. The landscaper said the payment was stopped. The pergola is half finished. There are piles of dirt and stone all over the yard." I closed the door quietly, hyper-aware of my neighbor who was still watching from across the hall. My mother paced my living room, her agitation evident in every sharp movement. Her face was flushed, and her normally neat hair was disheveled. "Are you going to say anything?" she demanded when I remained silent. "What would you like me to say, Mom?" I asked, my voice remarkably calm. "An explanation would be a good start. Your father and I have been calling you all day." I took a seat on my couch, adjusting my robe. I think the situation is fairly straightforward. I was funding a backyard renovation for an event I'm not welcome to attend. Since I'm not part of the celebration, I'm no longer funding the preparations for it. My mother's face contorted with frustration. "This is exactly the kind of dramatic overreaction your father was talking about. It's just a small family gathering." A small family gathering that includes friends, but not your own daughter. The hurt seeped through despite my efforts to remain detached. "We didn't think you'd want to drive all the way from Chicago for such a small thing," she repeated her earlier explanation, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I've been driving to Milwaukee every weekend for 2 months to oversee this renovation," I pointed out. "Clearly distance isn't the issue." Before she could respond, my apartment door burst open. My father strode in, followed closely by my brother Jackson. Apparently my mother had left the door unlocked behind her. "What the hell, Phoebe?" my father demanded, his face a thundercloud. "The yard looks like a disaster zone." Jackson hung back near the door, his expression more confused than angry. He nodded slightly to me in awkward acknowledgement. I remained seated, looking at the 3 of them invading my space. "Hello to you too, Dad. Jackson." "Don't get smart with me, young lady," my father snapped. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? We had to call everyone and tell them the anniversary party might need to be rescheduled." "That must be difficult for you," I replied evenly. "Having to change plans suddenly. Having to feel excluded." "I wouldn't know anything about that." The sarcasm wasn't lost on him. His face darkened further. "So that's what this is about. You're punishing us because we planned a small family gathering." "No, Dad. I'm simply choosing not to fund an event I'm not welcome to attend. That seems reasonable to me." My mother sank into the chair across from me. "We never said you weren't welcome, Phoebe." "Mom, please." Jackson finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "Aunt Linda told me what happened. You specifically told her the party was just for immediate family and didn't include Phoebe." I looked at my brother with surprise. This was not the unquestioning support of our parents I had come to expect from him. My mother flushed deeper. "We just thought with her busy schedule." "Stop it, Nancy." My father cut her off, surprising all of us. He ran a hand through his thinning hair and looked at me directly for the first time. "The truth is, we didn't invite you because we thought you might bring Marcus, and we wanted to keep it small." The absurdity of this excuse left me momentarily speechless. "So you excluded me, your daughter, because I might bring my boyfriend of over a year, while inviting 4 other couples who aren't family at all. Those are old friends," my father defended weakly, And I'm your daughter." My composure finally cracked. I stood up, tightening my robe sash. "Your daughter who has been busting her ass to give you the backyard of your dreams. Your daughter who has always been there whenever you needed anything. Your daughter who funded Jackson's kids' college accounts without being asked. Your daughter who apparently isn't family enough to celebrate your anniversary." The room fell silent. My outburst hung in the air between us. "We didn't think you'd make such a big deal about it," my mother finally said in a small voice. Those words hit me like a physical blow. "You didn't think I'd care about being excluded from my own parents' anniversary? Or you didn't think I'd have the spine to stand up for myself?" No one answered. My father stared at the floor. My mother twisted her hands in her lap. Only Jackson met my eyes, and I was startled to see what looked like understanding there. "Phoebe," Jackson said quietly, "I had no idea they didn't invite you. I assumed you were coming. When Aunt Linda called you, I thought it was about something else entirely." I believed him. For all our complicated history, my brother had never been deliberately cruel. "Well, now everyone knows where they stand," I said, suddenly exhausted. "I'm not restarting the payments. The backyard will stay exactly as it is unless you want to fund the rest yourselves. Now, if you don't mind, I've had a long day and I'm still in my bathrobe. I think it's time for you all to leave." "You can't just leave it like that," my father protested. "There are safety hazards with the construction half finished." "Dad," Jackson interrupted, "I think we should go. We can talk about the yard later." He gave me a look that seemed apologetic before turning to our parents. "Come on, I'll drive you back to Milwaukee." My mother rose slowly, looking suddenly older than her 60 years. "Phoebe, please. The anniversary is in 3 weeks. What are we supposed to do?" The guilt trip was so familiar it almost made me laugh. "I don't know, Mom. Maybe have it somewhere else. Maybe pay for the completion yourself. Maybe actually include your daughter in your celebration. There are lots of options." They filed out one by one, my father muttering about ungrateful children, my mother sniffling dramatically, Jackson last pausing at the door. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think they're wrong, and I'm sorry." After they left, I sat alone in my silent apartment, emotionally drained, but strangely peaceful. I hadn't raised my voice until the very end. I hadn't made threats. I had simply stated my truth and held my boundary. My phone pinged with a text from Allison. "On my way with reinforcements. Door code still 4292. For the first time that day, I smiled. The hardest part was over. Now came the aftermath. The following 2 weeks were eerily silent on the family front. After the explosive confrontation in my apartment, it seemed no one knew quite what to say. My phone, which had been overwhelmed with calls and messages before the showdown, now sat quiet except for work communications and check-ins from Allison and Marcus. That first evening after my family left, Allison arrived as promised with wine ice cream and fierce loyalty. "I cannot believe they did that to you," she fumed, pouring generous glasses of Cabernet while I changed out of my robe. "Actually, scratch that. I totally can believe it because they've been taking advantage of you forever." We settled on my couch, balancing wine glasses and bowls of chocolate ice cream as I recounted the confrontation in detail. The look on their faces when they realized I wasn't backing down, I said, still processing the memory. It was like they couldn't compute that I had set a boundary. "Because you never have before," Allison pointed out gently. "You've always been their ATM with no service fees." The truth of her words stung, but also reinforced my resolve. For years I had tried to buy my way into the inner circle of my family, hoping my financial contributions would translate into emotional inclusion. It never had. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction of client meetings and portfolio reviews. My colleagues noticed my subdued mood, but attributed it to normal work stress. Only my boss, Diane, who had become something of a mentor, pulled me aside to ask if everything was all right. "Family issues," I said vaguely. "Nothing that will affect my work." She nodded sympathetically. "Family can be our greatest strength and our deepest wound. My door is open if you need to talk." I thanked her but didn't elaborate. Something about this situation felt too raw to share widely. At night, I would find myself staring at my phone sometimes, hovering my finger over my mother's contact or my brother's. But I never made the call. This time I needed them to come to me to acknowledge what they had done. Marcus was my rock during this period. He didn't push me to reconcile or offer platitudes about blood being thicker than water. Instead, he simply provided steadfast support, bringing dinner when I worked late, listening when I needed to vent, and giving me space when I needed silence. You know what's weird? I told him one evening as we sat on my balcony watching the Chicago sunset. I feel guilty and empowered at the same time, like I've done something terrible but also something necessary. He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. That's because you're breaking a pattern that's existed your whole life. It's like a muscle you've never used before. It hurts, but it's making you stronger. 10 days after the confrontation, my phone finally chimed with a text from Jackson. Hey sis, just checking in. Parents still upset, but I think they're starting to get it. Told them they were wrong to exclude you. Miss you. Call if you want to talk. It wasn't an apology on behalf of my parents, but it was an acknowledgement that a wrong had been done. Coming from Jackson, who had always been the golden child, it meant more than I expected. I texted back simply, "Thanks for understanding. I miss you too." The anniversary date came and went without fanfare. Through mutual friends, I learned that my parents had canceled their party entirely, citing construction delays rather than the truth. The backyard remained in its half-finished state, a physical manifestation of our fractured relationship. 15 days after the confrontation, I was just leaving my office building when my phone rang with my father's number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" My voice was cautious. "Phoebe." My father sounded tired. "I'm in Chicago for a teaching conference. Can we meet somewhere to talk?" The request surprised me. My father rarely traveled for work and even more rarely initiated difficult conversations. When and where, I asked, not committing, but not refusing. "I'm at the Marriott downtown. There's a coffee shop in the lobby. I could meet you there in an hour if you're free." I checked my watch. It was just after 5. "I'll be there at 6, I said, and ended the call before I could change my mind. When I entered the hotel lobby coffee shop, my father was already there nursing a black coffee at a corner table. He looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered from 2 weeks ago. He stood when he saw me, an awkward half-rise from his chair. "Thank you for coming," he said as I took the seat across from him. "Can I get you something?" "I'm fine." I set my purse on the extra chair. "You wanted to talk?" My father nodded his fingers, tapping nervously on his coffee cup. "Yes, about what happened, about the party and the backyard and everything." I waited, unwilling to make this easier for him. He took a deep breath. "Your mother wanted me to ask if you would reconsider funding the completion of the backyard." Of course, that would be their first concern. The physical manifestation, not the emotional damage. "No." My answer was firm and immediate. He nodded as if he'd expected this. "I told her you wouldn't. She doesn't understand why you're being, in her words, so stubborn about this." "And what do you think, Dad?" I challenged. "Do you understand, or are you just here as Mom's messenger?" His eyes met mine, and for perhaps the first time in my adult life, he really looked at me, not as an extension of himself or as a resource, but as a person with her own valid feelings. "I think," he said slowly, "that we've been taking you for granted for a very long time, and I think this was the final straw." The simple acknowledgement released something tight in my chest. Yes, it was. My father set his coffee down and folded his hands on the table. "I'm not good at this stuff, Phoebe. The emotional talks. Your mother usually handles the family dynamics." "I've noticed." He winced slightly at my tone, but continued, "But I know I owe you an apology. We should have included you in the anniversary celebration. The excuses we gave were just that, excuses. The truth is, we've fallen into patterns with you and Jackson that aren't fair." "Why, Dad?" I asked the question that had haunted me for years, finally finding voice. Why has it always been different with me and Jackson? Why am I good enough to fund things, but not important enough to be included? My father's shoulders slumped. "I don't have a good answer for that. I think we always knew you would be okay no matter what. You were so capable, so self-sufficient from such a young age. Jackson needed more support, more encouragement. So I was punished for being competent." "Not punished," he protested. "We just allocated our attention where we thought it was needed most. And somewhere along the way, we started taking your success and your generosity for granted." It wasn't a complete answer, but it was more insight than I'd ever gotten before. "The backyard situation was wrong," my father continued. "We were wrong. I was wrong. You spent a small fortune on a gift for us, and we excluded you from enjoying it. I'm sorry, Phoebe. Truly sorry." His apology seemed genuine, but one conversation couldn't erase years of patterns. "What about Mom? Does she feel the same way?" My father hesitated. She's struggling with this. She sees your cancellation of the project as an attack, not as a boundary. She needs more time. Of course she did. My mother had always reframed any conflict as someone else's failure, never her own. I'm not restarting the payments, Dad, I said firmly, and I'm not going to pretend everything is fine just to make Mom comfortable. I know, he said, surprising me. I'm not asking you to. I just wanted to tell you I understand why you did what you did, and I'm sorry we drove you to that point. We talked for another hour, covering ground we had never explored before. He asked about my work, really listening to my answers. He inquired about Marcus with genuine interest. He even acknowledged that Jackson and I had been treated differently, though he struggled to articulate exactly why. When we finally parted, he hugged me awkwardly, patting my back like he had when I was a child. I'll talk to your mother, he promised, but it might take time. She's not good at admitting when she's wrong. I know, I said. I've had 34 years of experience with that. As I watched him walk back toward the elevator, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. The patterns in my family hadn't formed overnight, and they wouldn't be fixed in a single conversation. But for the first time, I wasn't the only one acknowledging they existed. 6 months after the backyard debacle, I found myself driving to Milwaukee for Thanksgiving. The journey felt different this time. I wasn't racing up to solve a problem or fulfill an obligation. I was visiting as an equal with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. Much had changed in those 6 months. After my coffee shop talk with my father, he had indeed spoken to my mother, though her initial reaction had been exactly as predicted. She had called me the next day, veering between guilt trips and thinly veiled accusations about embarrassing the family and leaving the backyard in shambles. I had let her speak, and when she finally ran out of steam, I said simply, Mom, I love you, but I'm not discussing this further until you're ready to acknowledge that excluding me from the anniversary was hurtful and wrong. The silence that followed was telling. My mother, who always had the last word, found herself without a response. Let me know when you're ready to talk about this calmly, I had added before ending the call. It had taken another 3 weeks before she called back, and even then her version of an apology left much to be desired. I've been thinking about what happened, she had begun stiffly, and while I still think you overreacted about the party, I can see how you might have felt left out. It wasn't exactly a heartfelt mea culpa, but from my mother, it was significant progress. Thank you for acknowledging that, I had replied, determined to accept even small steps forward. The backyard renovation had eventually been completed, though on a much more modest scale than originally planned. My parents had been forced to dip into their savings to address the safety issues with the half-finished construction, and Jackson had surprisingly stepped up to help with some of the physical labor recruiting friends to assist with the simpler aspects of the project. My brother and I had grown closer through this ordeal. Without the unspoken competition for our parents' approval, we had begun to develop a relationship based on mutual respect rather than old dynamics. He had called me regularly, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to vent about our parents' adjustment to the new normal. They keep expecting me to fix things with you, he had confided during one call, like I'm supposed to convince you to go back to how things were. I told them that's not happening, and they need to respect your boundaries. His support had been unexpected and deeply appreciated. Marcus had proposed 2 months after the confrontation. On a weekend trip to Lake Michigan, he had gotten down on one knee at sunset and presented a simple but elegant diamond ring. You showed me what courage looks like, he had said, standing up for yourself, knowing what you deserve. I want to spend my life with a woman that strong. I had said yes through tears of joy, finally feeling worthy of the kind of love that didn't come with conditions. Now, as I pulled into my parents' driveway for Thanksgiving dinner, my engagement ring caught the November sunlight. Marcus would be joining us later, coming directly from visiting his own family in the morning. The backyard visible from the driveway looked nothing like my original grand vision, but it was neat and functional. A smaller patio with simple furniture, a modest garden area, solar lights along the pathways. It represented something important, a project my family had completed themselves without expecting me to fund it. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her expression a mixture of nervousness and genuine happiness. You're here, she said, as though she had half expected me to cancel. I said I would be, I replied, stepping forward to accept her hug. It was slightly stiff, but real. Inside, the house smelled of turkey and pumpkin pie. My father emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron, a sight so unusual I had to stifle a laugh. "Phoebe," he greeted me warmly. "Happy Thanksgiving. Your mother has me on potato duty." "Dad's learned to cook," I said, raising an eyebrow at my mother. "He's learning," she corrected with a small smile. "We're both learning new things these days." The atmosphere was different from previous family gatherings. There was an awareness and intentionality that hadn't existed before. When Jackson and his family arrived, he hugged me tightly and whispered, "Proud of you, sis," in my ear. As we gathered around the table, my father surprised everyone by asking me to say grace, a role traditionally reserved for him as head of the household. It was a small gesture, but meaningful. The conversation during dinner flowed more naturally than I could remember. My mother actually asked questions about my work and listened to the answers. My father engaged Marcus in genuine conversation about his career in architectural design. When I shared news about an important client I had recently signed, everyone at the table offered congratulations, rather than immediately turning the conversation to Jackson's latest accomplishment. After dinner, while the others watched football in the living room, I found my mother alone in the kitchen putting away leftovers. "Need some help?" I offered, picking up a container. She nodded, and we worked in companionable silence for a few minutes. "I've been wanting to talk to you," she finally said, closing the refrigerator door and turning to face me. "Really talk, not just small talk." I leaned against the counter, giving her my full attention. "I'm listening." "What you did with the backyard," she began, then paused, choosing her words carefully. "At the time I was so angry. I thought you were being spiteful and dramatic. But now I understand it was probably the only way to make us really see you. It was the most insightful thing my mother had ever said about our relationship. It wasn't about the money," I told her quietly. "It was never about the money. It was about being valued as part of this family, not just for what I could provide." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I know that now. And I'm truly sorry, Phoebe. Not just about the anniversary party, but about all the times I've made you feel less important, less essential to our family. You deserved better from me. From us." The apology I had been waiting for my entire adult life washed over me, unexpected and healing. I felt tears spring to my own eyes. "Thank you for saying that, Mom. It means a lot." She reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "I'm trying to be better. I don't always know how, and I'll probably mess up again, but I'm trying." "That's all any of us can do," I said, squeezing back. "Try to be better than we were yesterday." Later, as Marcus and I prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside in the entryway. "Your mother told me about your talk in the kitchen," he said. "I want you to know I'm on the same page. We're working on changing those old patterns." I nodded, appreciating his words while maintaining realistic expectations. Decades of family dynamics wouldn't transform overnight. "One day at a time, Dad," I said. He smiled, then glanced at my engagement ring. "Marcus is a good man. You chose well." "I did," I agreed. "I've learned to recognize what healthy love looks like." The drive back to Chicago that night was peaceful. Marcus dozed in the passenger seat while I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The backyard incident had been painful but necessary, like lancing a wound to allow healing to begin. Our family would never be perfect, and old habits would sometimes resurface. But something fundamental had shifted. I had learned that true love doesn't require payment. That family should be about mutual respect, not one-sided giving. That standing up for yourself doesn't mean losing people, it means teaching them how to truly see you. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth wasn't determined by what I could provide, but by who I was. And that was a lesson worth every penny of $12,400. Have you ever had to take a stand with family who took your generosity for granted? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through difficult family situations. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others and yourself is to establish clear boundaries.